The October rain in New Orleans was unlike anywhere else. It fell like silver threads binding heaven and earth, cold, dense, and heavy enough to blur every streetlight until the city seemed swallowed by a damp, smoky veil. Sarah Hernandez tightened her thin coat as she exited the New Orleans Public Library, where she had just finished a late shift. The old building with its time-worn dome and red brick walls had gone silent as the heavy wooden doors closed behind her. The library was a second home to Sarah, a sanctuary within quiet pages where she found comfort after life's upheavals. But tonight, that peace did not follow her outside. Sarah's footsteps echoed softly on the rain-slick street, lonely against the vast emptiness. Clutching her bag to her chest, she glanced around. New Orleans at night wasn't deserted, but in this neighborhood where few people walked past 10 o'clock, the air carried an unsettling weight of danger. Her phone vibrated. The screen lit up with the name Emily Carter, her best friend since high school. "Sarah, can you hear me? My mom. She was in an accident. They rushed her to Mercy Hospital. The doctor said it's critical." Emily's sobs cracked through the line, freezing Sarah's blood. Emily and her mother had once been Sarah's lifeline, especially during the years she struggled with her own mother's illness. Mrs. Carter had driven Sarah to school and held her when she cried outside the radiation ward. She wasn't just Emily's mother, she was part of Sarah's family. "I'll be there, Emily. Don't cry. I'll come right away." Hanging up. Sarah hurried along the slippery sidewalk, but the old clock tower by the post office already struck 9:30. Only one last bus ran toward the hospital, and when Sarah reached the stop, she could only watch as the final bus pulled away, leaving her in the mingled roar of the engine and the rain. Her wallet held just enough for breakfast tomorrow. A taxi was unthinkable, but Emily needed her. "I'll walk if I have to," Sarah whispered, biting her lip. The street grew emptier. Neon lights flickered outside the bars, but the patrons stayed inside, leaving the sidewalks bare. A knot of unease tightened in her chest as she realized footsteps echoed behind her, matching her pace. She quickened her stride. The footsteps followed faster. Glancing back through the watery blur, Sarah spotted two men. One wore a cap pulled low, hands buried in his coat pockets. The other was tall, his long coat whipping in the wind. The distance between them shrank. Her breathing turned ragged. Panic's familiar grip rose ever since her mother's death. These attacks ambushed her like storms. The world narrowed, lights, fractured sounds retreated as if from a distant tunnel. She pulled out her keys clutched between her fingers like a makeshift weapon. But before she could act, her knees buckled. Panic blazed through her chest like fire. The footsteps loomed close. She collapsed against the rain-drenched pavement. At that instant, a sleek black car screeched to a halt, spraying water into the air. Its door swung open, and a man stepped out tall, commanding his black suit immaculate despite the downpour. Through the chaos, Sarah caught only one detail before losing consciousness in the stranger's arms, a pair of storm-gray eyes cold as winter thunderclouds. When she awoke, Sarah was stunned by the luxury surrounding her. A chandelier blazed above crimson velvet curtains, framed the windows, and the faint scent of expensive leather lingered in the air. She lay on a vast bed, the sheets calm and smooth as mist. The door opened. The man entered his leather shoes, striking the polished wooden floor with steady authority. His presence carried the quiet dominance of someone accustomed to obedience, never refusal. "You're awake." His voice was deep resonant, like a command disguised as reassurance. Where am I?" Sarah stammered, clutching the blanket to her chest. He paused, his sharp gaze sweeping over her, as if every secret she carried had already been bare. He didn't answer immediately, but sat across from her, fingers laced together. "Safe," he said at last, "for now." The words "for now" echoed in her mind like a warning bell. She studied him more closely. A man in his early 40s with chiseled features and eyes that seemed bottomless. The rain on his suit hadn't dimmed his authority. If anything, it made him appear like he'd stepped out of another world, one of power, wealth, and shadows. "Who are you?" A faint smile touched his lips, cold yet magnetic. "Richard Martinez." The name landed in the room like a blade of ice. Sarah's heart skipped. Martinez, the name splashed across newspapers, tied to billion-dollar real estate empires, stretching across the eastern seaboard. Yet his reputation carried whispers, two unfinished investigations rumors, of ties to Latin mafia syndicates. Her chest tightened. Why would a man like him save her? And why did his gaze feel less like a stranger's, and more like someone who had known her for years? Richard leaned back, fingers tapping the chair's armrest. Light caught on a faint scar above his left brow, a trace of storms in his past. Sarah Hernandez, 26, librarian at the New Orleans Public Library. Lives alone. Mother died of cancer 2 years ago. Father disappeared when you were 12. Sarah froze. Her pulse thundered, the blood in her veins turning to ice. How do you know all this? Richard tilted his head, storm-gray eyes glinting with something unreadable. Information always belongs to the one who seeks it. But with you, Sarah, this isn't a mere coincidence. He rose, pacing slowly toward the window, where rain still drummed against the glass. Tonight, they weren't simply after your wallet. Sarah gripped the blanket tighter, her voice trembling. Who are they? Richard turned his gaze a swirling tempest. My enemies, and the ones who are hunting. You. In that gilded room, Sarah's heart plummeted into an abyss. His words had unlocked a door to a world she never thought she'd enter, yet now there was no way back. The rain had stopped yet inside the luxurious penthouse overlooking the Mississippi River. A trace of dampness lingered like nature's breath still hung in the air after the storm. Sarah sat motionless on the bed, her hand unconsciously clutching the sheets. Her eyes wary as they fixed on the man before her, Richard Martinez. He stood near the glass window, the city lights casting his silhouette in sharp, commanding lines. His steady and confident stance seemed to belong to another world, far removed from hers, a world far beyond that of a simple librarian, surrounded by books and the scent of old paper. Your enemies. Why are they after me? Sarah's voice trembled hoarse from the remnants of fear. Richard turned his silver-gray eyes piercing into her dense and heavy as storm clouds before they break. Because they know that to touch you is to touch me. Sarah's head spun. She had never met him before or set foot in this world of wealth and danger. Why would a billionaire, a man known across America, tie his name to hers? We don't even know each other. She tried to steady her voice, though her heart raced wildly. Richard moved toward her, each step deliberate, unhurried yet heavy enough to thicken the air around them. He stopped only a few paces from the bed, leaning just enough for their eyes to lock. Sarah, there are things you don't need to know yet. But believe me, your presence in that rain-soaked night was no accident. For a fleeting moment, Sarah felt like she had stepped into the pages of some mysterious novel, pulled into a story spinning far beyond her control. Before she could speak again, the door swung open. A middle-aged man entered, his white coat, crisp glasses gleaming. Miss Hernandez, I am Mr. Martinez's private physician. I need to confirm that your health is stable after the panic attack. Hesitant Sarah allowed him to check her pulse and blood pressure. He soon left, assuring her that she needed rest and calm. The door closed, leaving the room silent once more, silence now heavier than before. Richard settled into the leather armchair opposite the bed, his eyes never leaving her. Your panic attacks. They come from the past, don't they? His voice was low, not a question but a statement. Sarah lowered her gaze, fingers digging into the blanket. Memories of her mother battling cancer surged back like a blade, the endless nights at the hospital, the agony of watching her writhe in pain, and finally her departure without goodbye. That loss had carved itself into Sarah's soul, birthing panic attacks she could never escape. You have no right to know that she burst out, her voice breaking part anger, part helplessness. Richard was silent for a moment before suddenly speaking. Your mother, she was a remarkable woman. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide. You knew my mother? A flicker of hesitation crossed his gaze, but it quickly vanished behind his calm facade. I met her once. She left me with a promise that I must protect you. Sarah froze. Every rational thought crumbled. Why would a billionaire, a man like Richard, be linked to her mother? And why did his expression bear the weight of a secret too heavy to name? The silence stretched on, broken only by the fading patter of rain against the window. Richard rose, leaving her in the tangle of her thoughts. Before stepping out, he spoke only one line. You'll stay here tonight. This is the safest place for you. Tomorrow we'll talk again." The door closed behind him. Sarah sat still in the opulent yet cold room, her heart torn between fear and the unsettling ripple stirred by his strange protective concern. That night she barely slept. The sensation of being watched clung to her, interlaced with gnawing curiosity about Richard Martinez. Who was he beyond the polished billionaire image worshipped by the media? What debt did he owe her mother? And more importantly, why had she of all people become the target of his enemies? When dawn brushed New Orleans skyscrapers with hues of pink, Sarah had only just drifted into uneasy sleep when a knock sounded at her door. A young woman entered, stern yet professional, introducing herself as Richard's personal assistant. She carried a set of brand new clothes, elegant, perfectly tailored to Sarah's size, with uncanny precision that sent a shiver down her spine. "Mr. Martinez requests that you join him for breakfast." The modern kitchen below glowed with warm light, a stark contrast to the cold grandeur of the bedroom. Richard sat there already immaculate, in a crisp white shirt, coffee cup in hand. He looked up as she entered the corner of his lips, lifting a welcoming and challenging smile. "Sit down, Sarah." The way he spoke her name without the formality of Miss Hernandez made her pulse falter. The breakfast spread was lavish, yet Sarah found it impossible to swallow. Richard's presence was overwhelming, filling every inch of the spacious kitchen. "How long do you intend to keep me here?" she demanded, her eyes locked on his. Richard set down his cup, his gaze calm yet sharp. "Until I know who is after you." "And why?" Sarah let out a dry laugh. "I'm just a librarian. I have nothing worth following." Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping low and cutting like wind before a storm wrong. "Sometimes the most valuable thing isn't money, but connection." Sarah froze. In that fleeting instant, she felt he was pointing to some link between her and a past he was not yet ready to reveal. The air grew heavy. She felt like she'd been dragged into a labyrinth, where Richard Martinez alone held the map and she a helpless wanderer. He rose, slipping on his suit jacket and leaving several bound documents on the table. Before leaving, he said, "Today you won't go out alone. I have business, but my people will remain here. You're safe. Don't try to run Sarah. Out there is no place for you right now." The door closed, his footsteps fading against the marble floor. Sarah gripped the teacup, her fingers trembling. "There is no place for you." His words were not just a warning. They were a declaration. That from the moment she stepped into last night's storm, her life had already veered onto another path. A path Sarah had never chosen. But did she still have the chance to turn back? That morning in New Orleans dawned bright and clear sunlight pouring through the towering glass windows of the penthouse. Sarah stood before the mirror, staring at the simple dress Richard's assistant had prepared for her. The navy blue fabric fit her slender frame so perfectly that it was almost unsettling. She brushed her fingers across the hem, overwhelmed by a strange sensation, as if she was no longer the Sarah Hernandez of yesterday, but someone being pulled deeper into a glittering, shadowed world. A knock at the door. The young woman from the previous day entered, her voice soft yet firm. "Miss Hernandez, Mr. Martinez wants to see you in his private library." Sarah blinked. A private library? Instantly, her mind filled with the image of old shelves, the scent of paper, the familiar hush of whispered voices. Curiosity tugged at her, easing some of her unease, and she nodded, following. Richard's library occupied the top floor. Walls paneled with polished wood gleamed beneath the golden glow of warm light. Bookshelves soared toward the ceiling, complete with sliding ladders. The atmosphere was nothing like the coldness of the bedroom. Here it was calm, quiet, almost a sanctuary. Richard was already standing by the glass wall, the Mississippi glimmering in sunlight behind him. When he turned, Sarah saw that his eyes carried not only storms, but something achingly human and unspoken sorrow. "Sit." He gestured toward a brown leather armchair. Sarah sat, her heart brimming with questions. Richard was silent for a long while before slowly opening a drawer. From it, he pulled out an envelope, its edges yellowed with age. He placed it before her. "This belongs to you." Sarah's hands trembled. The handwriting on the envelope was instantly familiar. Maria Hernandez, her mother's name. Her eyes widened. Why? Why do you have this? Leaning back. Richard's voice dropped low, heavy with the shadows of the past. Because your mother gave it to me one afternoon many years ago. Sarah's fingers shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter ink, faded but still legible. My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, I am no longer by your side. But you are not alone. I entrusted you to someone, a man I know will protect you with all his strength. Do not be afraid, my daughter. Be strong. You deserve a life that is more than survival. You deserve to love and to be loved. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, blurring the words. She clutched the letter tightly torn between grief and a rising tide of anger. My mother! She knew you. Richard did not deny it. He rose, stepping closer, his gaze intense. Your mother once worked on a charity project funded by the Martinez Foundation. I first met her at Mercy Hospital. When her illness worsened, she begged me for one thing, that if the day came when she was gone, I would ensure her daughter would not be left defenseless in a cruel world. Sarah's grip on the letter tightened. Each word seared into her chest. Yet amidst her emotion, a sharp doubt flared. Why you? Why would a man like you make such a promise to my mother? You're a billionaire whose name is whispered in connection with power and shadows. What did you owe her? Richard froze. A crack appeared in his carefully composed face for the first time since she had met him. It wasn't her I owed. It was myself. Once I failed to protect someone. He said no more, but the weight of that single admission opened a chasm of mystery. Sarah longed to press him further, yet the wall in his eyes was impenetrable. The air grew heavy. Sarah stood abruptly, her tear-brimmed eyes flashing. You saved me, sheltered me, I'm grateful. But the fact that you had a past with my mother, and that I've become some burden tied to a promise, I can't accept my life being dictated by anyone else. Richard stepped forward, his shadow enveloping hers. You think you're just a burden? His voice was low, like wind slamming against rooftops before a storm. No, Sarah. Your very existence reminds me that I am still human. Her heart stilled. In his eyes flickered something she could not name, not possession, not mere duty. It was a struggle between obligation and feeling between power and vulnerability. Sarah backed away, yet her pulse thundered. Never before had she encountered a man so distant and near one, whose very presence made her aware of every breath. Richard turned, hiding his gaze in the shadows cast by the window. Read that letter again and again, Sarah. Then you'll understand what your mother wanted. As for me, I won't force you, but know this from now on you can no longer stand apart. Whether you wish it or not, you are already inside the storm. Sarah said nothing. His words were chains and yet also an undeniable truth. When Richard left the library, Sarah collapsed into the chair, clutching the letter to her chest. A shaft of sunlight cut through the glass, illuminating the faded ink like a sign from her mother. Yet instead of peace, her heart ignited with dread. The past had never been just the past. It was seeping into the present, leading her toward secrets far darker. That night she tossed and turned. City lights from the balcony painted her face, reflecting eyes full of restless thought. She had lost her mother, lost her father, and now faced a man who was both savior and storm, threatening to sweep her life away. And yet, deep within, she could not deny it. Beneath the layers of fear, her heart quivered each time Richard appeared. He was a living paradox, both danger and safety. And somewhere within that old letter, Sarah knew her mother had not only wanted her daughter to be protected. She wanted her to step out of the shadows and learn at last what it meant to love and be loved, even if such love could destroy everything. In the days after reading her mother's letter, Sarah drifted between belief and doubt. She still lived in the penthouse overlooking the Mississippi River, but the fragile sense of safety could not silence the storm of questions inside her. Richard was often absent, leaving behind only brief instructions. He was like a cold wind felt everywhere, yet impossible to grasp when she reached out. One late afternoon, as the last sunlight gilded the city, Richard suddenly appeared in the library where Sarah was reading. His black suit clung to him, tie-loosened face etched with fatigue, yet his eyes were as sharp as ever, startling her. Get ready, Sarah. Tonight you're coming with me. She looked up, lips dry. where Richard paused, his gaze falling on the page she hadn't turned. To an evening, where you'll understand why I told you this world isn't meant for you. Sarah had no choice. Fear twisted in her chest, mingled with a dangerous thread of curiosity. A gleaming limousine carried them out of New Orleans, racing toward Houston. Through the window, the highway lights streaked like arrows piercing the night. Sarah sat in silence, the low hum of the engine filling her ears, her heart quickening each time Richard's reflection flickered in the glass. When the car stopped, she saw a building by the harbor before her. From the outside, it looked like a luxurious restaurant, red-tiled roof glass walls, glowing with warm golden light. Yet the air around it was far too still, stripped of the liveliness such places usually held. Richard's hand pressed gently yet firmly against her back, guiding her inside. The restaurant glittered with crystal chandeliers and tables dressed in pristine white linens. But Sarah soon realized this was no ordinary dinner. The tables were empty save for one long table in the center, where several men in dark suits sat with stone-hard faces. As Richard entered, they all turned. Silence thickened, broken only by the echo of his shoes on marble. Sarah felt their stares on her, curious, scrutinizing, and edged with suspicion. One gray-haired man rose, a thin smile cutting across his face. Martinez. It's been a long time. Richard gave a slight nod, his voice calm, yet cold. Delgado. Sarah stiffened. Victor Delgado. She remembered seeing his name in the news, hailed as a shipping magnate, yet always shadowed by rumors of illicit dealings. Richard pulled a chair for Sarah, sitting beside him, directly across from Delgado. His eyes flicked a warning, and she stayed silent, though every nerve in her body screamed with tension. The dinner began without food, only strong liquor poured into crystal glasses. Delgado raised his glass, his smile predatory. I hear you've found a new treasure to keep at your side. His gaze slid to Sarah. This girl, she doesn't belong in our world. Sarah froze, hands trembling beneath the table. Richard didn't glance at her. He swirled his drink slowly, his voice cutting like steel. Her name is not on the table tonight. Delgado laughed, dry and mocking, his voice echoing. You've changed, Martinez. You never used to bring anyone with you. Especially not a girl who is far too fragile to survive in this game. The air grew taut, humming with invisible blades. Sarah sat rigid, ears straining to catch every word. This was no casual exchange, a silent duel between men who ruled empires. Richard set his glass down, his tone dropping lower, weightier. Delgado, I'm here to end this circle of games. You've played every trick to sabotage the Houston port contract. But if you touch the one beside me, that is the move you will regret. Sarah shivered. His words weren't merely a warning, they were a declaration. She officially became the centerpiece of a war she had never asked to fight. Delgado's eyes narrowed, settling on her lips, curving into a taunting smirk. A librarian, and she can rattle Richard Martinez. Interesting. Sarah lowered her head, her pulse racing. She understood too well one wrong move, and she could become nothing more than a pawn in these men's negotiations. When they left the building, Sarah was still trembling. The night wind off the Houston Bay lashed at her, carrying the sting of salt. Richard remained silent until they were back inside the car doors, shutting out the world. Why did you bring me there? Sarah's voice burst out sharp with anger. To make me a spectacle in front of Delgado? Richard turned to her, his eyes sharp, though tempered by restraint. No, I brought you there so you would understand you stopped being just an ordinary girl from the moment you entered my life. You need to see the faces of those who want to destroy me. And you. Sarah's throat tightened. He had said "and you" with absolute certainty, as if their fates were bound no matter her resistance. I don't want to be dragged into this war, she whispered, trembling. Richard leaned slightly closer, his gaze softening with a hidden layer of emotion. Sarah, I once tried to keep everything outside of my heart, but some promises once spoken can never be taken back. Her mind flashed to her mother's letter, to the look in Richard's eyes when he confessed he had once failed to save someone. The pieces locked together into a larger, darker question. Whom had Richard Martinez lost, and why was he so determined never to lose her the same way outside Houston glowed beneath a sea of lights? Inside the car, silence pressed in, broken only by Sarah's uneven breaths and the steady composure radiating from Richard. And Sarah realized, though she hated the control he exerted, her heart was already faltering deep within, caught in a dangerous blend of fear and longing. The wind from the Houston Bay howled as the limousine carried Sarah and Richard back to New Orleans. Even within the warmth of the car, Sarah felt a chill running down her spine. Delgado's gaze, his veiled words still echoed in her mind, like a refrain that refused to fade. She turned to look at Richard. He sat still, his profile set against the window, the streetlights tracing sharp lines across his face. The mocking smile he'd worn before Delgado was gone, as was the fleeting gentleness she'd glimpsed in the library. What remained was the grim stillness of a man who carried a battlefield inside his chest. Sarah wanted to ask him 1,000 questions, but the words caught in her throat. Fear held her back, but also the more profound sense that if she knew more, there would be no way back to the life she once had. The next morning, just as sunlight brushed the skyline, Sarah's phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar. The message froze her heart. Meet me, alone, if you want to know the truth about Delgado and Richard Martinez. Beneath it was an address, a small cafe in the old quarter on the city's edge. Sarah hesitated. Richard's warning echoed in her mind. Don't go out alone. Yet the hunger for answers, the gnawing doubt proved too strong to resist. She slipped on her coat and quietly left the penthouse. Each hurried step along New Orleans' damp sidewalks felt like betrayal. The cafe was nearly empty, filled only with the bittersweet scent of roasted beans. And in the farthest corner, a face she knew well looked up. Emily Carter. Sarah froze. They had grown apart over the years after Emily's mother had moved out of state for treatment. Silence had crept into their friendship. But never had Sarah imagined Emily would be the one to summon her now. Emily? Sarah's voice shook. Emily rose and embraced her as if no time had passed. Yet within the warmth of her arms, Sarah felt a hidden chill. I've heard about you. You're staying with Richard Martinez, aren't you? Sarah gave a slight nod. Emily's expression darkened, then smoothed into a fragile smile. Do you know who he really is? Delgado isn't the only dangerous man in this city. Sarah's grip on her coffee cup tightened, her pulse quickening. What do you mean? Emily inhaled deeply, eyes flickering with unease. Richard Martinez is not the savior you think. He's tied to more shadows than you can imagine. Delgado is just a rival. Martinez isn't much cleaner. I know because... She faltered, her eyes glistening. Because I worked for Delgado. The words cut through Sarah like a knife. You... What did you say? Emily clutched her hands, whispering urgently. I had no choice. My family owes Delgado more than you can imagine. He gave me 2 options, spy on those connected to Martinez, or watch my mother lose everything. Sarah's breath caught. Memories of childhood, the way Emily had shared bread with her, sat at her mother's hospital bed, shattered into shards of glass. So how long? Have you been betraying me? Her voice broke into fragments. Tears slid down Emily's cheeks, but the guilt etched on her face could not mend the wound. 3 years. Since your mother began treatment, I've fed Delgado everything: your work at the library, your routines, your friends, everything. Sarah trembled, her hands icy cold. Betrayal from her only true friend was crueler than any threat Delgado could make. Emily, how could you? I didn't want to, but I had to choose between you and my mother. Emily's voice cracked. And Martinez isn't a saint, Sarah. Delgado is right. Martinez keeps you as a tool, a weakness to protect his empire. You're living in a gilded cage. The words pierced Sarah's heart. She shot to her feet chair, toppling against the tiles. I don't know who's right anymore, but friendship should never be a bargaining chip. Emily, I don't recognize you. And with that, she stormed out of the cafe, tears mingling with the fine drizzle on the street. By dusk, Sarah returned to the penthouse, soaked and shaken. Richard was waiting. His eyes darkened as he saw her pale face and drenched coat. Where have you been? His voice was ice. Sarah pressed her lips shut. Richard stepped closer, his breath heavy with restrained fury. Who did you meet? Sarah lifted her chin, defiance sparking in her gaze. Emily, My friend, the one you said was irrelevant. And she told me, you're no different from Delgado. The air froze. Richard's eyes locked on hers, a deep line etching into his face. Do you believe her? Sarah bit her lip. Emily's words stabbed at the fragile trust she had begun to place in him. I don't know who to believe anymore. Richard closed his eyes briefly as though struggling to cage his anger and pain. When he opened them, his voice was rough, his hand pressing gently but firmly on her shoulder. Sarah, I won't justify myself. You have every right to doubt me. But know this, Delgado seeks to destroy me, and he will not hesitate to use your friend as a weapon. He let go, turning toward the window, his shadow stretched long across the marble floor. I won't stop you if you want to leave this place. But remember, out there, it isn't just Delgado. Out there is a war. Sarah stood rooted, her heart splintering. Friendship, trust, even her modest dreams all lay in ruins. Yet deep within the despair, another flame sparked the desperate need to uncover the truth, even if it meant walking into the darkest storm. The Miami sea wind burned against Sarah's skin, carrying the sting of salt, suffocating her even inside the beachfront villa Richard had chosen as a temporary haven. This city was nothing like New Orleans or Houston, sunlit, vibrant, alive with color. Yet the unease within her painted everything in heavy shades of gray. Since meeting Emily, Sarah had lived in an endless conflict. Every thought of her childhood friend stabbed like betrayal. But whenever she looked at Richard, recalling his words, "You may doubt me, but I will never let Delgado have you," she felt herself pulled deeper into a spiral with no escape, the Miami villa. One of the Martinez estates stood in isolation palm groves behind an endless ocean before. During those days, Sarah rarely left, partly because Richard forbade it, partly because she no longer trusted the world outside this fragile safe zone. But one afternoon, as she passed Richard's office, she noticed the door ajar. Sunlight spilled across a mahogany desk where an open file lay, scattered a few pages slipping free. Sarah hesitated, torn between conscience and curiosity. Curiosity won. She stepped closer. Bold letters at the top of the page froze her in place, confidential. Case file, Hernandez Gabriel. Her breath caught. Gabriel Hernandez. Her father. The man who had vanished from her life when she was 12, leaving not a word behind. Her trembling fingers flipped through the file. Old photographs, financial records, investigation notes. Her father had once been an accountant for a shell company, one directly tied to the Martinez empire. Among the papers, an old headline read, "Financial Scandal Covered Up at New York Port. Insider Source Reveals." Sarah's heart pounded, vision blurring. Her father had worked for Richard, or at least within his system. Why had her mother never told her? And why had Richard kept this file instead of letting it die in obscurity? The door slammed open. Richard stood there. His eyes for a fleeting instant were as cold as steel. Sarah gasped, dropping the file. Papers were scattered across the floor. "Sarah!" His voice was thunder before a storm. "Who permitted you to touch this?" "I can't believe it," Sarah's voice cracked. "You kept a file on my father. You've known everything from the beginning, and you never told me." Richard strode forward, stooping to gather the papers, his movements clipped taut with restraint. "You were not meant to see this." Why Sarah's tears spilled. "My father vanished for years. My mother died carrying secrets. And you, the one I'm forced to trust, hid everything from me." Why Richard froze, clutching the file, his eyes storming with conflict. "Because the truth would destroy you." "I have the right to know," she screamed, voice shaking with fury. For a moment, his mask cracked. He set the file on the desk, bracing both hands hard against the wood, as though one more push might shatter every wall he'd built. "Your father, Gabriel Hernandez, was once someone I trusted. He managed finances for a branch of the corporation. But then, he betrayed us. He siphoned millions from the investment fund. And when the truth came out, he disappeared. Do you understand why your mother begged me? Because she carried not only her illness, but the debt of the man who abandoned you both." Sarah staggered, breath choking in her chest. "No, that's not possible." Richard's gaze locked on hers, storm gray eyes drilling into her soul. "Sarah, your father was not a victim. He was the beginning, and you, his daughter, are now a target, a lever for those exploiting my weakness." Her hands clutched her head, his words echoing like hammer blows. Her father, the man she'd yearned for through her childhood, was not a hero, but a stain. And Richard, the man she hated and yet could not ignore, held the key to that truth. The air in the room thickened until she could hardly breathe. "So my whole life is just a shadow of his sins," she cried. "Is your protection only because of him?" Richard seized her shoulders, his eyes blazing. "No, I protect you. Because of you. Because your eyes remind me of the one I failed to save. Because I promised your mother. Don't think you are just the weight of a debt. Sarah, you matter to me more than you realize." His words sliced her heart into agony, yet trembling with an undeniable pull. She shoved him away and fled, tears burning into the salt wind off the Miami Sea. That night, Sarah stood alone on the balcony, listening to the ceaseless crash of waves. Within her, images of her father and Richard collided, abandonment and salvation. Two forces locked in brutal opposition. One had left her. The other had saved her. And yet both chained her to truths she did not want to face. Richard stood silently inside the villa, watching her fragile silhouette through the glass. For the first time, his face betrayed helplessness. He could control markets, rivals, empires, but not the heart of one woman, nor the wounds of her past. The Miami trip had left a wound carved deep into Sarah's heart. She still could not accept the truth about her father, nor forgive Richard for hiding the file from her. Their bond had become a storm of chaos, anger, resistance, and an undeniable pull Sarah tried to reject, which grew stronger. In the days that followed, Richard was busier than ever. Endless meetings with partners, phone calls stretching into the night, his voice sharp as steel whenever Delgado's name was spoken. Sarah drifted silently through the villa, avoiding his gaze, though her heart trembled each time his shadow passed by. Then, one evening, as the sun sank over Miami's horizon, Sarah received a call. A rasping, mocking voice slithered through the speaker. "Miss Hernandez, perhaps it's time you stepped out of the golden cage Martinez has locked you in." Sarah froze. Who is this Victor Delgado? The name iced her blood. "Richard can't protect you forever, Sarah. You're nothing but a pawn to him. If you want to know the truth about your father, and meet me." Dallas. Warehouse 14. The old industrial district. Alone. The line went dead. Sarah stood paralyzed, phone shaking in her hand. She knew it was a trap, but the voice of the past, the ghost named Gabriel Hernandez, pulled her toward it no matter the cost. The Dallas industrial district was deathly cold at night. Abandoned warehouses loomed like ancient giants, silent in the dark, with only the wind whistling through rusted shutters. Sarah stepped into Warehouse 14, her heart pounding. A single weak bulb cast light over the dusty concrete floor. The moment she crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind her. A harsh laugh echoed. "Welcome, Sarah Hernandez." Victor Delgado emerged from the shadows, a hulking figure with eyes black as coal. Behind him, several armed men flanked his steps, their weapons glinting in the dim light. Sarah backed away, only to be seized by one of them. "What do you want?" she demanded, forcing her voice to stay steady, though fear gripped her. Delgado closed in the reek of smoke and liquor heavy on his breath. He leaned close, his whisper sharp against her ear. "The truth. Your father once worked for Martinez, but he betrayed him and vanished. I have proof. Proof Martinez would never show you." Sarah's eyes widened. Delgado smirked. "He keeps you like a bird in a cage to control you, to atone for sins past. But me, I can give you freedom. All you need to do is stand with me. Never." Her voice shook, but her refusal rang clear. Delgado's tone dropped a growl. "Do you think you have a choice? Martinez will come. And when he does, I'll end it, him and you." Outside, sleek black cars rolled to a halt under darkness. Richard stepped out, towering, his storm-gray eyes burning with lethal resolve. Daniel Cruz, his loyal right hand, was at his side, followed by armed men in tailored suits. Richard gripped the gun in his hand, his voice like tempered steel. "Sarah is in there. Tonight, either Delgado ends, or I do." The warehouse doors burst open. The standoff ignited taut as a drawn blade. Delgado stood at the center, one hand gripping Sarah's shoulder like prey. Martinez. So quick to arrive. Clearly the little bird means something. Richard raised his weapon, eyes cold. Let her go, Delgado. Your game ends here. Delgado's laughter cracked the silence, echoing like shrapnel. And no, this is only the beginning. Do you think you can bury the truth forever? She will know how her father betrayed you, and she will hate you more than she hates me. Sarah's chest tightened. Her gaze darted to Richard, desperate for a flicker of truth. He did not answer. He only kept his gun trained on Delgado. Don't use her as your bargaining chip. Delgado jerked his chin. One of his men pressed a gun to Sarah's temple. Death loomed close enough to feel. Then Richard's words returned to her. If you're in danger, breathe. Stay calm. Find the weakness. Sarah inhaled sharply. In a flash, she stomped her heel into her captor's foot and drove her elbow into his ribs. He stumbled, dropping the gun. The chaos was all Richard needed. He lunged forward. Shots rang out, thunderous gunpowder thick in the air. Daniel Cruz and Richard's men stormed in the warehouse, erupting in gunfire. Sarah hit the floor, her heart racing. Delgado ducked behind a crate, shouting, Martinez, you can't protect her forever. One day she'll learn everything, and she'll leave you herself. Richard said nothing. He pulled Sarah into his arms, shielding her body from the hail of bullets. For the first time she felt him tremble, not with fear, but with the fury he barely contained. Sarah, trust me, he whispered, voice raw in her ear. Tears blurred her vision. She let go for the first time in her life, placing her fate in someone else's hands. When the gunfire subsided, Delgado had slipped into the shadows with a handful of men. The warehouse reeked of smoke and blood. Sarah shivered on the concrete floor until Richard lifted her to her feet. His gaze locked on hers, blazing with anger and worry. What were you thinking about coming here alone? Do you know, you nearly drove me mad? Sarah's voice broke, trembling. I just wanted the truth. I can't live in the dark anymore. Richard's grip on her shoulders tightened, his storm gray eyes searing through her. The truth can kill you, Sarah. But I can't let you out of my sight. Not for a moment. His confession reverberated through the shattered warehouse, making her heart quake. Secrets still stood between them, shadows yet to be revealed. But one thing was sure, he was the only one holding her with every ounce of his strength amid chaos. After the gunfire-drenched night in Dallas, Sarah was flown back to Miami on Richard's private jet. Throughout the flight, she remained silent, staring out the dark window where the moon's faint reflection shimmered over the sea. Richard sat across from her storm-gray eyes, fixed on her, yet no word was spoken. Both knew the distance between them wasn't only Delgado's doing, but the weight of secrets still unspoken. When they landed, a convoy escorted them back to the villa. The silence was suffocating inside the car, each breath heavy with unasked questions. Sarah's mind replayed Delgado's words. One day she will know the truth and leave you. Her chest tightened, but each glance at Richard only deepened the turmoil. In Dallas, in his arms, she had trusted him absolutely. Yet now suspicion gnawed at her like an unhealed wound. The next day, unease hung over the Martinez estate. Servants crept more cautious than usual. Daniel Cruz oversaw every entrance and exit, but Sarah noticed another presence lingering in the shadows, Adrian Vega. Adrian had long been one of Richard's lieutenants, sharp-eyed and seemingly loyal. To Sarah, he was an enigma, half cordial, half distant. That afternoon, as she wandered through the back gardens, Adrian appeared. His demeanor seemed unusually calm, and he wore a white shirt under a dark jacket. Miss Hernandez, he said softly, yet with an edge of steel. There's something I want to show you. Sarah hesitated. Richard's warnings about trust still echoed inside her, yet curiosity and the growing cracks in her faith drew her forward. He led her to an unused office at the far end of the hall. Closing the door, Adrian withdrew a thick envelope from his coat and placed it on the desk. You want the truth about your father, don't you? The name alone made her heart stop. Adrian opened the envelope, sliding out photographs. In them was a man with weary eyes, but unmistakably familiar, Gabriel Hernandez. He stood beside a group of men in black suits, a warehouse behind them stamped with the logo M Corp, the Martinez conglomerate's emblem. This was your father working under Richard. He never betrayed him. The truth is, Richard used him as a scapegoat in a corrupt deal. When it blew up, Gabriel vanished, forced out by Martinez himself. Sarah's hand shook as she clutched the photo. No, Richard told me my father... Adrian smirked bitter. What Richard tells you doesn't matter. What matters is what he hides. Why do you think? Because he's afraid you'll discover the truth. And now he keeps you close, not out of love, but control. The world seemed to collapse around her. The images of Dallas. How Richard had shielded her, the whisper. Trust me, all tangled into chaos. I don't believe it, she whispered, though her voice quavered. He saved me, more than once. Adrian leaned closer, voice low. Saved you to atone for guilt. But tell me, Sarah, can you truly love a man whose hands shaped your father's ruin? That night, sleep eluded her. In the vast bedroom, waves against the shore were relentless like whispers of doubt. She clutched the photo of her father, tears soaking her pillow. Half her heart longed to believe Richard. The other half was torn open by Adrian's poison. Near midnight, the door creaked open. Richard entered, vest, discarded tie loosened, but his eyes sharp as ever. Sarah, have you been crying? She turned her face away, but he was already beside her, lifting her chin, forcing her gaze into his. Who showed you something? His voice was low, unyielding. Her heart raced. With trembling hands, she held out the photo. Richard's eyes darkened at once. For a moment, he said nothing, containing a storm behind his composure. Adrian, he muttered venom in his tone. Only he would have kept these. Sarah's voice broke. So, did you truly betray my father? Richard studied her long and hard, then sat on the edge of the bed, taking her trembling hand in his. Sarah. I never wanted you to learn this way, he said, his voice weighted with pain. Your father was involved in a dangerous deal. I tried to save him, but he disappeared to protect your family. Yes, I hid the truth because I wanted you to remember him with love, not the cruelty of reality. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She wanted to believe him, yet Adrian's words cut like blades. I need time, she whispered, pulling her hand free. Richard rose slowly, shoulders heavy with unspoken grief. At the door, he paused. Trust me, Sarah. No matter what collapses around us, I only want to protect you. As Sarah passed the library the next day, she overheard a voice. Adrian speaking on the phone, urgent, low. The plan is working. She's starting to doubt Martinez. Delgado will return. This is our chance. Sarah froze, her pulse racing. The truth struck her. Adrian hadn't just wanted her to see evidence. He was manipulating her, using her as a blade against Richard. At that moment, Richard appeared at the far end of the hall. Their eyes met. No words passed between them, yet 1,000 questions burned in the silence. Late that night, Sarah lingered outside the study, overhearing Richard and Daniel Cruz. Adrian has betrayed us, Richard said, voice low and hard. He's aligned with Delgado. But we need proof before we act. Daniel's reply was grim. If we don't move soon, Sarah will be the target. Delgado knows your weakness now. Sarah's breath caught. She was the weakness. Delgado exploited it. Adrian exploited it. Everything circled back to one truth: Richard's feelings for her. She turned away, her chest torn by fear and determination. Love had become both her strength and her shackle. That night, Sarah stood on the balcony, the ocean wind tangling her hair. Tears streamed again, but this time they fell with resolve. If I am only a weakness, then I must become a strength. If love for Richard makes me a weapon, I will choose for myself. I will not be prey. Clutching her father's photo, her eyes gleamed with a newfound fire. For the first time, Sarah was no longer reacting to the storm. She was ready to step into it. The Miami sky was draped in ashen gray that day, a storm brewing offshore. Sarah stood by her bedroom window, watching seabirds scatter helplessly in the strong winds. Her heart felt no different, caught between doubt and love, truth and lies. For days, silence stretched between her and Richard like a fracture too deep to mend. He did not attempt to justify himself, only watched her quietly, as if accepting that she must decide where her trust lay for herself. But the longer the distance grew, the more terrified Sarah became, afraid that if the fracture shattered completely, there would be no way back. That evening, Adrian appeared wearing a gentle smile that did little to soften the cold glint in his eyes. "Miss Sarah, I know you're conflicted. Richard will never give you the truth." "But I will." Sarah hesitated. "You've already told me too much, Adrian. I don't know what I can believe anymore." He tilted his head slightly, his voice smooth as honey laced with poison. "Believe me or see for yourself. There is a place where you'll find all the answers, but you must go tonight before Richard discovers." Sarah stared at him, dread rising in her chest. Yet the yearning to know about her father, to uncover the truth about Richard, burned stronger than any warning. "If this is a trap, Adrian, you'll regret it," she whispered, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. Adrian chuckled softly. "Regret is a luxury, one I lost long ago." The Martinez estate was a steel fortress, yet Sarah slipped through a side passage on a stormy night. Adrian led her to a waiting black SUV. The drive was silent, save for the wipers dragging across the windshield, smearing the darkness into jagged streaks. The vehicle stopped at an abandoned warehouse by the docks. Inside, dim yellow light spilled across cracked concrete. A figure stepped from the shadows. Delgado. His eyes gleamed like a predator's lips, curling in cruel delight. "At last, señorita," he said, his gravelly voice echoing through the cavernous space. Sarah's pulse thundered. She turned and chatted to Adrian, horror in her gaze. You betrayed me?" Adrian didn't deny it. He merely shrugged. "I chose to side with the man who can tip the balance. Richard has sat on his throne too long. It's time for someone else to reign." Delgado's leather shoes struck the ground like a gavel as he advanced. "Thank you, Adrian. From now on, Martinez is no longer untouchable." "And you, Sarah, are the key." Fear rippled through her, but defiance flared in her eyes. "I am not a pawn in your game." Delgado's laughter was harsh, chilling the warehouse further. "Not a pawn, no. An ace. Richard Martinez loves you. That is his fatal weakness. With you in my hands, he will kneel." Back at the Martinez estate, chaos erupted when Daniel Cruz discovered Sarah's empty room. Richard's eyes blazed like blades in the great hall as he confronted Adrian, who feigned calm. "Where is she?" Richard's voice was low and lethal, his fists clenched tight. Adrian replied smoothly, "Perhaps she needed space, Richard. You cannot keep someone bound by lies forever." The words were gasoline on fire. Richard seized Adrian by the collar, slamming him against the wall. "If Sarah comes to any harm, I will tear your life apart piece by piece." Adrian smirked, his eyes flickering with defiance. "Then save her if you still can." Richard's gaze darkened. Instead of killing Adrian on the spot, he released him with a shove and turned to Daniel. "Follow him. He'll lead us to her." Inside the warehouse, Delgado sat across from Sarah at a crude wooden table. Outside, rain hammered down, thunder splitting the sky. Did you know Sarah Delgado's gaze probed every flicker of her face? Your father once stood at the very choice you face now. Loyalty to Martinez, or his family. He chose to vanish, and Martinez never forgave him. Sarah's hands clenched, her lips trembling. "If you think I'll turn against Richard, you're wrong." Delgado's laugh was sharp, merciless. "Oh, I don't need you to oppose him. I only need you here. Your very existence is the chain around his neck." Sarah's chest tightened, yet fire sparked in her eyes. She remembered Richard's words. "Trust me, even if the world falls apart." And in that moment, she swore she would not let herself be used as the blade against him. Late into the storm, Richard and Daniel tracked Sarah's hidden GPS signal to the abandoned docks. The map ended at the warehouse, where rain poured like a curtain of iron. Before leaving the car, Daniel gripped Richard's shoulder. "You know this isn't just a rescue. This is a trap. Delgado wants you to walk in." Richard's reply was cold as steel. "Let it be a trap. If Sarah's there, I'll burn it all down." Lightning flashed, illuminating Richard's towering form, eyes blazing like molten silver. Delgado ordered Sarah to tie her to a metal chair at the center of the room. He raised a glass of liquor, his voice dripping with menace. "Tonight, Martinez will come. And in front of him, I'll show him what it means to lose what he cannot protect." Sarah glared back, her eyes wet but unwavering. "You can kill me, but you'll never defeat Richard, because you don't understand there are things no blood or power can ever buy." Delgado chuckled, shrugging. "We'll see." At that moment, the warehouse doors burst open. Wind howled inside. Richard strode in, tall and commanding as judgment itself. His gaze swept the room, locking on Sarah, pale, disheveled, but her eyes still burning bright. "Delgado," Richard's voice was deep, steady. "Let her go. This fight is between you and me. Leave her out of it." Delgado narrowed his eyes, sneering. "You still don't see, do you? She is the fight." In that instant, Sarah understood that Richard's love and his entire fate were on the line. If he stepped into the trap, everything could collapse. Her heart clenched, and for the first time she cried out through the storm. "Richard, don't lose everything because of me." The warehouse fell into a breathless silence, as though the storm held still. Richard turned to her, his eyes blazing with both pain and resolve. "Sarah, you are everything to me. If I can't protect you, then nothing else matters." Delgado's laughter rang out, echoing with thunder. "Then you'll lose them both." He signaled his men. Safeties clicked off. The air thickened with gunpowder betrayal and fate. Sarah shut her eyes, whispering a silent prayer. Would love be strong enough to shatter every chain, or would it become the fire that consumed them both? The old warehouse by the Miami docks quaked beneath the storm. Thunder cracked like the drums of fate. Sarah was bound tightly to a chair, her heart racing wildly, but her gaze never left the man standing like a shield before her. Richard Martinez, his tall, unyielding frame a wall of steel, his storm-gray eyes locked on Delgado. Delgado lounged on a wooden chair, a glass of liquor in hand, his smile dripping with arrogance. "You came, Martinez. I knew you couldn't abandon her. Love is a weakness, and tonight it will bury you." Richard slowly peeled off his soaked coat, his silver eyes flashing like blades in the dark. "My weakness is also the strength you will never understand." Delgado's men raised their guns, circling. Daniel Cruz and Richard's loyal guards moved silently into position behind crates, waiting for the signal. The air was suffocating, filled only with the storm's roar outside. Sarah shook her head, tears brimming. "Richard, don't risk everything for me." He turned his eyes unexpectedly tender amidst this hell, Sarah. "I have never regretted loving you. If I had to choose again, I would still choose you, even at the cost of my life." Her throat tightened. At that moment, Sarah realized her love was no longer tainted by doubt, but bound by absolute trust. Delgado clapped mockingly, touching. "But love won't stop a bullet. Martinez, kneel. Hand over the Miami docks and your global shipping lines to me, or watch this woman die before your eyes." Richard stepped forward, his voice resonating like thunder. "You think I'll bow because you threaten her?" Delgado leveled his gun at Sarah. In that split second, Richard surged forward like a storm unleashed. A hidden pistol slipped from his sleeve. A deafening gunshot split the air. Chaos erupted. Bullets ricocheted, sparks flared, and the acrid tang of gunpowder filled the air. Daniel and his men stormed out, clashing with Delgado's guards. Sarah writhed desperately, the rope slicing her wrists until blood trickled, but she didn't stop. In the lightning's flash, she saw Richard face to face with Delgado. Two men, two destinies colliding. "You'll never win!" Delgado roared, firing shot after shot. Richard advanced, dodging each round with unwavering resolve. A bullet tore through his shoulder, crimson soaking his suit. Yet he pressed forward. At last, Richard slammed into Delgado, twisting his arm until the gun spun aside. A single thunderous shot echoed. Delgado collapsed, hatred frozen in his eyes, as life left them. Silence reigned, broken only by the relentless rain, a requiem from the storm. Richard staggered back to Sarah, blood dripping from his shoulder pain, shadowing his silver eyes. His trembling hands pulled at the ropes until they snapped free. "You're safe now," he whispered, lips tight with agony. Sarah sobbed, throwing her arms around him. "No, don't leave me. You promised you'd never leave me." Richard's weary smile was gentle, radiant, even in pain. I promised your mother I'd protect you at all costs. Now I promise myself, I'll live for you. Days later, news of Delgado's death swept across Miami. The underworld murmured, but no one dared challenge Richard again. On the villa balcony, his shoulder bound in bandages, he gazed out over the sea, eyes solemn as steel. Sarah came to him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. I heard Adrian say, "My father once worked for you. I want the truth." Richard was silent momentarily before handing her a small wooden box. Inside lay an old letter, its handwriting unsteady. Gabriel Hernandez, her father. Sarah, if you're reading this, I am gone. I left Martinez's world, not because I was betrayed, but because I wanted to keep you far from its shadows. Richard promised to protect you in my place. Forgive me for leaving you alone. Tears spilled down Sarah's face. She clutched the letter and turned to Richard. You kept your promise, not only my father's, but your heart's. Richard stroked her hair gently, whispering, and you turned that promise into love. 1 year later. On the rooftop of the newly inaugurated Martinez Foundation, Sarah stood among white roses, her hand resting softly on her belly, where new life quietly grew. She smiled at the golden city of Miami stretched out before her. Richard joined her strong as ever, though his eyes now carried a peace few had ever seen. Are you happy? He asked, voice low and tender. Sarah looked up at him, eyes shining. Happy. Because I no longer run from the past. I have you a new family, a future. Richard lowered his lips to her forehead, kissing her long and gently. There was no more darkness in that kiss, only trust and forever. The love story of Richard Martinez and Sarah Hernandez began with a storm with panic and despair. They endured betrayal, secrets, and loss, only to find each other in the heart's deepest place. For some loves, only when tested by blood and tears do they become eternal. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that helps future stories come alive and reach more hearts.